Hey guys, Brian here from Better Chess Training, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing a game where Boris Spassky has the white pieces against the Benko Gambit. This game was played in the French Championship of 1992, and of course, we know this is 20 years after he was the world champion. But in this video, he's going to show us that he's still got it. Check it out. Hey guys, Brian here from Better Chess Training, and today I'd like to share a game. Again, this is a game that was analyzed on my stream recently, and it's between former world champion Boris Spassky against another player named Cook. I don't know much about Mr. Cook, but this is from the French Championship in 1992. And we'll get into it right away here. Spassky is playing the white pieces, and he starts out with d4. And black plays knight to f6, c4, c5, d5. And here we have b5 entering into a Benko Gambit. C takes b5 and a6. Now here, there's different ways for white to decline this. For example, with moves like either b6 or maybe e3. But in this case, Spassky takes the pawn on a6. g6 is played. Knight to c3. Bishop takes a6. And here, white plays e4, offering this trade of light square bishops. Now, white loses the opportunity to castle, but it really isn't that big of a deal. Here we have d6, and this variation is still within theory here. g3, bishop to g7. Here we could see king to g2. So the king gets to safety, and we'll see in a little bit that he'll be able to develop his rook as well. Okay, black castles, knight to f3, bishop or knight b to d7, h3, and queen to b6. Kind of going quickly through these opening moves here. And here we have rook to e1, supporting the e-pawn and developing the rook. So we can see even though white wasn't able to castle, he's able to develop his rook and get his king to safely nicely. Okay, rook f to b8. And so here we have sort of the battle of ideas between white and black. If you haven't noticed, white is up a pawn, but black has compensation in return for these nice open A and B file, as well as this nice bishop on g7 along the long diagonal. And a lot of times, black will be able to develop an initiative. So the task for the white player is to come out of this unscathed, and then he'll be a pawn up. So let's see how Spassky deals with this. Well, he plays rook to e2. And this move is well known now, and it basically protecting the b pawn. The queen goes to a6, and white plays queen to c2, again putting more protection here on the second rank and to that b pawn. Look at my notes here. And from here, knight to b6. And here, when we were analyzing this, we were looking at a few moves. We would love to play something like b3, but it's a little dangerous because of this bishop. See if there is actually a tactical refutation here. Yeah, knight f takes d5, for example. And then if we take back with the knight takes again. And if we try to defend, then we get hit with a move like this. Knight to b4, and black is standing pretty well. Okay. Similarly, in this position, we were looking at moves like how can we develop this bishop. So we look at moves like bishop to f4, but this doesn't really provide a problem either for black, as he can now develop. And now he's looking at moves like bishop takes c3, as well as moves like knight to e5. So positions like this would be definitely okay um, for black. Okay, let's go back to the game. So instead, in order to sort of defend against this knight coming in here, for example, to a4, where it could exert pressure on b2 as well as challenge this knight, white makes a very interesting play here, a4. Now, you might think this makes the b4 square weak, but as you can see, it will be kind of difficult for black to post ideally a knight here. And by advancing this pawn in a way, we sort of limit the scope of black's pieces trying to attack it. We'll see later, too, that it has another purpose as well. Okay, knight f to d7. And here we have another interesting move, rook to a2. Now, what's the idea behind this move? Well, we're adding protection here, now against the whole second rank, in case we want to advance the b pawn. And also, and perhaps more importantly, we take the rook off of this dangerous diagonal. So we can advance this b pawn. As we saw, we saw this when we were analyzing this. There were a lot of potential combinations where black takes on c3, and then after white takes back, this rook would be hanging. And so by moving the rook to a2, we eliminate any of those possibilities as well. Now here, look here at my knight to c4 was played, and this move isn't quite the best because it's going to allow white to actually sort of take over the initiative a little bit. Before we move on, let's look at what black could have played. Black could have exchanged on c3, and here, of course, we can't. If we take here with the queen, then we have, of course, queen to e2, so we can't do that. And then if we take here with the b pawn, this isn't horrible, but now look at this. This knight is sitting pretty here on c4. And this b file is looking nice. We can maybe play our queen to b6 or b7 and then maybe infiltrate that way at some point. So this position and then this pawn on a4 becomes quite weak without the b pawn to support it. Okay, so that was a possibility, not losing for white, but definitely gives black a little more counterplay than what he played in the game. Okay, so rook to a2, queen to c4, and here we have b3. Remember, now we have removed the rook on a2, so now we can play this, and here the knight is forced to go to e5. So here we were just thinking about what to do, and the idea is, well, I'll show you in a moment. White exchanges on e5, and after black takes back, white plays knight to b5. And the idea here is that now we're blocking out this queen from coming in over here. We're blocking the rook here, and we have our own tactical threats of knight to c7. So you can see here that black is kind of losing a little bit of initiative, and he's getting less and less compensation for that pawn he invested earlier in the opening. Okay, c4 is played, trying to break things up. And here, again, we were looking at moves like f4. And f4 actually wouldn't be bad, but I think the thing that maybe Spassky feared and something to think about in your own games is that, yes, it kicks this knight, and this knight has to move back, say, to d7. But the second rank becomes a little weak. And I think, as you can see from these moves, Spassky's concept here was, I'm a pawn up, so let me dissipate white's initiative, and then I will have a technical advantage. And so instead he plays solid bishop to f4. Okay, rook to c8 is played, supporting here. And here another interesting choice. Let me read my notes on this. Is bishop takes e5. And normally we wouldn't want to exchange this bishop for the knight, especially since black has this monster dark square bishop. But as we're going to see here, this knight actually controls a lot of these key squares, these key dark squares anyway. And again, we're going to be simplifying into a situation where white's knight will be just about as good as black's bishop. Okay? Okay, c takes b3, and we take back with the queen. Okay, bishop takes e5, and here again we are looking at this f4, but this is where a little restraint is called for, because again, f4, even though it might be useful at some point, it's a little weakening, and because we're already up material, we don't need to press. So Spassky shows us how to do this. Rook e to c2, really black's only area of control was the c file, so we're going to contest that. Rook takes c2, and I hope you guys saw queen takes c2. Of course, we don't want to take with the rook because the a4 pawn would be hanging. And after rook to c8, this queen could have gone a few places. Could have gone to b3, but chooses to go to e2. Now, part of this is that now we might look at advancing these pawns and having some access to the king's side. Now, on black's point of view, his game is starting to become a little bit defensive. So before he had some open lines, and he was trying to create an initiative. And now, especially ever since knight to c4, now he's a little bit on the defensive. Queen to a5, and the idea here is to mainly to stop this pawn from advancing, because now it went from being a weak pawn, now that there's less material on the board, to being a dangerous passed pawn. Okay, and here rook to c2, threatening the rook so that black doesn't have time to capture on a4. Rook takes c2, queen takes c2, and now we can see that white's advantage is becoming more clear, because now we're seeing that this knight, again, controlling some of these entry squares, especially d4, and we'll see in a little bit that white is going to maneuver this knight to an even better square. Okay, queen to e1. Black is trying to drum up some counterplay, maybe against white's king. And here is a moment where I'm going to see, why don't you guys pause the video? I'm going to just pause for 5 seconds here and try to figure out white's plan and what he played next. Okay, in this position, white made a very interesting move, because when we were looking at this on stream, we felt that white would love to get to the c6 square. And so we were looking for all these ways. Let's play queen to d3. Let's play queen to c4, so that we can play, we could bring our knight here to d4. And instead, we should have been looking at a more direct way, even though it kind of is counterintuitive at first to us. So we play knight to a7. So even though it seems like we're bringing the knight out of play, really it's a 2-move plan to bring it to c6. Okay, bishop to c3. And again, trying to drum up some counterplay here, and also looking to prevent this a pawn from advancing, and knight to c6. And here we can see how nice this knight is now, as it's controlling a lot of key squares, as well as perhaps supporting the advance of this pawn. All right, well, black brings the king over to protect the pawn and also to activate the king. Queen to d3 is played. And let me see what I have down here. The notes for queen d3. Of course, queen to d3, that is. And here, the idea here is that we're going to try to exchange these queens off, or at least threaten it. Okay, bishop to d2 is played. Otherwise, we'd be playing queen to e3. Okay, queen to d4. And of course, we're threatening checkmate right here. So black has to play f6. And here is actually a very instrumental point too. So a lot of this game was, the first phase was extinguishing black's initiative. And then the second phase was trading down. So now that we have the winning endgame with a single pawn, with a an extra pawn, and especially a pass pawn on the queen side. And now with and Spassky was very good at doing this, as well as many of the masters are very good at doing this, is when you have one advantage or your opponent has one weakness, you seek out to create another one. So here, white plays h4. The idea here is to look to break open on the king side. h5 is played, and again, this is offering, the whole point here was to provoke this h5, and we'll see why momentarily. Okay, queen to d3, king to f7, and here queen to f3. And this is an important move because, well, you'll see very soon. Okay, queen to a1, looking to take this. And here, again, is an important concept of this transformation of one advantage into another. So white is going to trade off this a4 pawn, which is the extra pawn, in order to open up the king side. So g4, queen takes a4, g takes h5, g takes h5. And this is actually funny because one of my the viewers on stream was first noting how solid of a player Spassky is. And if you've studied a lot of his games, especially when he was the world champion, you'll know that, well, he was a universal player. He could play pretty much any position well. But he was quite the attacker. And basically here, Spassky is saying, let me show you. Spassky is saying, let me show you what I can do now. And this is really very simple, but very delightful. Queen takes h5 check, king to g7. And here, the end is coming soon. Queen to g4 check, king to f8, and then queen to e6. And there is a lot of bad things coming for black here. So at this point, black resigned. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. And as I mentioned, this video is sort of a summary of the game that we studied on my Tuesday stream on Twitch. So if you want to actually study the game with me and try to guess the moves and analyze with me a little bit, check out my Twitch stream on Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. East EDT, basically. And also, if you want to see my previous video, you can check it out. I have a link down below. And finally, if you want to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.